The prairie stretched endlessly before Jeb Hartley, brown grass whispering secrets to an empty sky. 5 years he'd lived here, mending fences that kept nothing in and nobody out, just lines drawn against loneliness. His hands, cracked like drought-worn leather, gripped the post-hole digger while morning painted the horizon gold. The horses nickered uneasily. Jeb squinted west where vultures circled, black specks against cloudless blue. Death on the prairie meant coyotes, wolves, or worse men. He grabbed his Winchester and walked toward the dried creek bed, boots crunching scorched earth. She lay face down among the stones, fingers still clutching prairie grass like hope itself. Comanche beadwork decorated her doeskin dress. Jeb's breath caught. Helping her meant danger. Leaving her meant damnation. The vultures descended lower, impatient. He knelt beside her, checking for breath. Alive, barely. In that moment, Jeb Hartley's 5 years of chosen solitude ended with a decision that would bring 200 warriors to his door. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The woman's weight felt like nothing in Jeb's arms, bones sharp beneath the doeskin dress as he carried her from the creek bed. Her head lolled against his shoulder, black hair matted with dust and dried blood. Inside his cabin, he laid her on his own cot, the buffalo hide blanket rough but warm beneath her. She woke with a gasp, eyes wild with terror. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as she scrambled backward, hitting the log wall. Jeb stepped back immediately, raising both palms toward her, trying to show he meant no harm. She watched him like a trapped animal, chest heaving with panic. "Easy now," he said softly, though something in her unfocused gaze told him she couldn't hear. He moved to the water bucket slowly, deliberately, filling a tin cup. When he offered it, she pressed harder against the wall. He set it on the floor between them and retreated to the far side of the small cabin. For long minutes they stayed frozen, her dark eyes tracking his every breath. Finally, thirst won. She inched forward, grabbed the cup, and drank greedily, water running down her chin. When she finished, she set it down carefully and began moving her hands in elaborate patterns, graceful, deliberate gestures that clearly held meaning he couldn't grasp. Jeb shook his head, pointed to his ears, then his mouth, trying to convey he didn't understand. Her shoulders sagged with frustration. She looked around the sparse cabin, the iron cook stove, muslin curtains, his few possessions, then back at him. Her fingers traced her doeskin dress, pointed outside, then crossed her wrists. Even without words, the message was clear: she'd been a captive. He ladled beef broth from the pot on the stove, the smell filling the cabin. When he set the bowl near her, she hesitated. Then hunger overcame fear. She ate slowly, with a dignity that survived despite her condition. Between spoonfuls, she watched him, assessment replacing terror in her expression. As twilight painted the cabin walls amber, she found a stick and began drawing in the dirt floor. A horse, mountains, many figures with spears. Then she drew herself, small and alone, moving away from them. Her story, told in dust and gestures. When she finished, tears ran silently down her cheeks. Jeb pointed to his cot, then to himself, then to his chair, indicating she should rest. Understanding flickered in her eyes, followed by something he hadn't expected: gratitude. Morning came gently to the prairie, sunlight creeping through the muslin curtains like a cautious visitor. The woman was already awake, sitting upright on the cot, watching Jeb stir from his uncomfortable night in the wooden chair. He stretched, joints protesting, and noticed how she immediately tensed at his movement. "Morning," he said from habit, though she couldn't hear. He pointed to himself and mouthed slowly, "Jeb." Then again, hand on his chest, "Jeb." She understood. Her hand moved to her own chest, and her lips formed words without sound. He couldn't read them, so she tried again, then finally traced letters in the air. But Jeb had never learned sign language, and his reading was limited to simple words. Frustrated, she gave up and instead began helping without being asked. When he moved to prepare breakfast, she stood beside him, watching his every move. He showed her where he kept the sourdough starter, how he mixed it with flour and water. Her hands mimicked his motions. Learning through observation, she found the washboard and bucket, indicating she could wash the clothes piled in the corner. He nodded, grateful for the help and the strange companionship her presence brought. They worked through the morning in comfortable silence, a different kind than his usual solitude. She helped him carry water from the well, her strength surprising him. Despite her recent ordeal, she moved with purpose, as if work itself was healing. When she smiled at successfully starting the fire in the cook stove, Jeb felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he'd forgotten existed. But as noon approached, she grew restless. Her eyes kept turning to the horizon, scanning the empty grassland. Then Jeb saw it too. Smoke signals rising from the distant ridges, thin columns of gray against the afternoon sky. 3 puffs, pause, 3 more. A pattern repeated from different directions. The woman's entire demeanor changed. She paced the cabin, peering through the windows, her breathing quick and shallow. As evening shadows lengthened, she grabbed Jeb's arm with surprising strength and pulled him to the door. Her hands flew in rapid signs, the same gesture repeated urgently, fingers spread wide, brought together, spread again. Many, many were coming. Distant drums began with the sunset, a rhythm that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The horses in the barn whinnied nervously, sensing what Jeb was only beginning to understand. The woman's eyes held no terror now, only urgent warning. She pushed him toward his rifle, then helped him barricade the door with the heavy crossbar. The drums grew louder as darkness fell. Then came the sound that made Jeb's blood run cold, hoofbeats. Not a few riders, not even a dozen. The thunder of hundreds of horses approaching through the night, and his small cabin standing alone on the vast prairie. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The woman touched his shoulder gently, and in her eyes he saw something unexpected, not fear, but sorrow. She knew who was coming, and she knew why. Her hand moved over her heart, then toward him, a gesture he understood perfectly. "I'm sorry." "Well," Jeb said to the darkness gathering outside, gripping his rifle with steady hands, "I reckon we all got to face our choices sometime." The hoofbeats grew louder, surrounding them like a living storm. Through the window, the first torches appeared, dots of flame spreading across the prairie like fallen stars. 200 warriors had come for the woman in his cabin, and Jeb Hartley stood between them and her, knowing he might have only minutes left to live. The woman moved to stand beside him, not behind. Whatever came next, she would face it with him. Her courage in that moment told him more than any words could. She hadn't asked for his help, but she wouldn't let him face the consequences alone. The drums stopped. The sudden silence was worse than thunder. Then came a voice, powerful and commanding, speaking words in Comanche that needed no translation. They wanted her back, and they would take her over his dead body if necessary. The torches formed a perfect circle around Jeb's homestead, each flame held by a mounted warrior, their faces painted with war colors that flickered orange and shadow in the dancing light. 200 strong. They sat their painted ponies with the stillness of carved stone, tomahawks and lances glinting. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring, broken only by the occasional snort of a horse or creak of leather. Then the circle parted. A man rode through on a black stallion that seemed to absorb the torchlight rather than reflect it. His war bonnet swept down his back, eagle feathers rustling in the night breeze. Even without understanding the murmured words that rippled through the warriors, Jeb knew this was their chief. The man's presence commanded the darkness itself, turning the very air heavy with authority. The chief dismounted with fluid grace, his eyes never leaving the cabin. He walked forward until he stood just beyond rifle range, then spoke in accented but clear English. "White man, you have someone who belongs to us." Jeb's throat felt like sand, but his voice came steady. Nobody belongs to anybody, far as I know. There's a woman here, true enough. Found her half dead by the creek. She's resting inside. You will bring her out. It wasn't a request. Can't do that, Chief. Woman's been through enough. She comes out when she's ready, not before. A younger warrior urged his horse forward, war paint harsh across his cheekbones, speaking rapid Comanche to the chief. The chief raised one hand, and the warrior fell silent, though his eyes burned with barely contained violence. You do not know who she is, the chief said, his voice carrying across the night like distant thunder. Don't need to. She needed help. That's all that mattered. The woman suddenly pushed past Jeb, stepping through the doorway before he could stop her. The moment she appeared, a collective intake of breath swept through the warriors. Several called out in Comanche, voices mixing relief and anger. She stood tall despite her obvious exhaustion, chin raised with a pride that made her look regal even in her torn doeskin dress. The chief's composure cracked. "Silent Moon," he said. And in those two words, Jeb heard a father's anguish. She moved down the cabin steps slowly, deliberately, keeping herself between Jeb and the warriors. Her hands began to move in elaborate signs, graceful and forceful at once. The chief watched, his face cycling through emotions: relief, confusion, growing amazement. The warriors stirred restlessly, understanding her signs, murmuring among themselves. Silent Moon turned back to Jeb, pointed to him, then placed her hand over her heart. She mimed eating, drinking, sleeping safely. Then she faced her father again, signing with increasing passion. She showed her wrists unmarked, unbound, pointed to Jeb's rifle still leaning against the doorframe, not aimed at her, demonstrated how he'd carried her, helped her, asked nothing in return. The young warrior from before dismounted, approaching the chief. They spoke in low, urgent tones. Jeb caught the warrior glancing at him with something that might have been surprise or even respect. Other warriors began dismounting, forming a semicircle behind their chief, torches creating a wall of fire and shadow. "She says you did not know who she was," the chief said finally, his English careful and measured. "Says you helped her though you knew she was Comanche. In these times, with the blood between our peoples, why would you do this?" Jeb met the chief's eyes directly. Man sees someone dying. He helps. That's all there is to it. Even an enemy. She wasn't my enemy. She was just someone who needed help. Silent Moon signed something emphatically to her father. The chief's expression shifted, and he asked, "She says you gave her your own food while you went without. Is this true?" Jeb shrugged. "Had some jerky in my pocket. Wasn't much." The chief studied him for a long moment, then turned to address his warriors in Comanche. Whatever he said caused an immediate uproar. Several warriors shouted what sounded like protests. Others seemed to be arguing in Jeb's favor. Silent Moon stepped forward again, signing rapidly, her movements sharp with frustration at the delay. The chief raised his hand for silence. When he spoke again, it was in English, meant for both Jeb and his warriors to understand. "My daughter says you are a good man. She says the Great Spirit brought her to you when she escaped the Kiowa who took her. She says—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "She says you showed her more kindness in one day than she has seen from white men in her lifetime. Just did what anybody would do," Jeb said quietly. "No," the chief replied, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. "That is not what anybody would do. That is what almost nobody would do." He looked at his daughter, then back at Jeb. "I am Standing Bear, chief of this band. My daughter has spoken for you. But my warriors demand proof of your intentions. They think this is a trap, that you mean to sell her to the soldiers, or worse." "Then they can search the place," Jeb offered. "Won't find anything but a man trying to scratch out a living on hard land. No soldiers, no weapons but that rifle and an old Colt. Nothing worth selling and nobody to sell to, even if I had a mind to, which I don't." Standing Bear considered this, then gave orders in Comanche. Several warriors dismounted and approached the cabin. Jeb stepped aside, letting them enter. He heard them moving through his few possessions, checking the barn, Looking for any sign of deception, Silent Moon watched her father, signing occasionally, seeming to plead for something Jeb couldn't understand. When the warriors returned, they reported to Standing Bear in their own language. One held up Jeb's meager supplies, a nearly empty flour sack, a few strips of jerky, some coffee. Another showed the chief Jeb's worn Bible, its pages yellowed and edges frayed from years of handling. Standing Bear walked closer, until he stood just a few feet from Jeb. This close, Jeb could see the lines carved by years of leadership and loss in the chief's face. "You live poorly," the chief observed. "Yet you shared what little you had with my daughter. Man doesn't need much to get by. Most white men want everything. I'm not most white men. That's why I'm out here instead of in town." Silent Moon moved between them again, signing urgently to her father. Standing Bear watched her hands, his expression softening slightly. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, looking between his daughter and the strange white man who had saved her. "The night is long," Standing Bear said finally. "We will camp here. In the morning, we will decide what is to be done with you." It wasn't a reprieve, exactly, but it wasn't an execution either. Jeb nodded, understanding he'd passed the first test, but knowing the hardest part was still to come. 200 warriors began setting up camp around his small homestead, their torches turning the prairie into a field of stars brought to earth. And somewhere in that constellation of fire, his fate would be decided. The warriors formed a circle near the largest fire, their painted faces gleaming in the flickering light. Standing Bear sat on a buffalo robe, his war bonnet removed and placed carefully beside him. Silent Moon knelt to his right, her hands never still, painting stories in the air that Jeb couldn't read but somehow began to understand through their urgency and grace. A young warrior stepped forward, the same one who had protested earlier. He spoke English with careful precision, though his accent was thick. "I am Spotted Eagle. The chief asks that I speak your words so you may understand." He didn't look pleased with the assignment, but his tone remained respectful. Silent Moon's hands moved in elaborate patterns, her whole body becoming part of the narrative. Spotted Eagle watched, then translated, his voice growing softer as the story unfolded. "She says the Kiowa raiding party came at dawn, 2 moons past. They wanted horses, but they took her too when they found her gathering herbs alone. She was to be traded to the Mexicans for rifles." The warriors listened intently, some nodding, others frowning. Silent Moon continued, her gestures becoming more animated. She pointed to the sky, swept her arms wide, then brought them down sharply. "The storm came 3 nights ago." Spotted Eagle continued. "Thunder and lightning like the spirits were at war. The Kiowa guards took shelter, left her tied to a tree, but the rain made the ropes soft. She worked them loose, ran into the darkness. She ran until her feet bled, then ran more. No water for 2 days, no food for 3. When the sun rose on the 3rd day, she could not run anymore." Silent Moon turned to Jeb then, her signs slower, more deliberate. She mimed collapse, then gentle hands lifting her. She placed her hand over her heart, then extended it toward him. "She says she prepared to die." Spotted Eagle's voice had lost its hard edge. "She made peace with the spirits and waited. Then you came. Not a soldier, not a traitor, not a man seeking reward. Just," he paused, searching for words, "just a man who saw suffering and chose to ease it." Standing Bear spoke in Comanche, his deep voice carrying authority. Several warriors responded, their tones varying from skeptical to thoughtful. Silent Moon signed rapidly at them, frustration evident in her movements. "My sister is angry," Spotted Eagle explained, a hint of amusement creeping into his translation. "She says you judge this white man for being white. But did any of you ride out to find her? Did any of you track the Kiowa? No. You waited for word, made plans for revenge. This stranger did more without knowing her than her own people did knowing she was taken." The accusation stung. Several warriors looked away, shame flickering across their features. One older warrior, his hair streaked with gray, spoke at length. Standing Bear listened, nodding occasionally. Red Hawk speaks truth, Spotted Eagle translated. He says the white man could have sold her to the army for gold, could have used her return to bargain for land or cattle. Instead, he fed her his own food. He paused, then added, Red Hawk's own daughter was taken 5 winters past. Soldiers found her. They did not return her kindly. Jeb felt the weight of their eyes on him. I lost family too, he said quietly. Not to raids or war, to greed and betrayal. My brother sold our farm out from under me while I was away working the railroad. Took everything, including my wife. Said I was too soft, too trusting. He looked directly at Standing Bear. Maybe I am, but I'd rather be too soft than too hard. Rather trust and be wrong than suspect and be alone. Silent Moon watched him intently as Spotted Eagle translated. When he finished, she turned to her father and signed something that made the chief's expression change. He studied Jeb with new interest. My daughter says you understand loss without seeking vengeance. This is unusual for white men. It's unusual for any man, Jeb replied, but hate's a poison that kills the one drinking it, not the one it's aimed at. I came out here to get away from it, not to spread more. Silent Moon stood and walked to where Jeb's meager supplies had been placed by the searching warriors. She picked up each item, the near-empty flour sack, the few strips of jerky, the coffee, and showed them to the assembled warriors. Then she signed rapidly, pointed to her own healthy appearance despite her ordeal, and then to Jeb. She shows that you gave her the better portion of everything, Spotted Eagle said, his voice thoughtful now. She ate bread while you had jerky. She had coffee while you drank water. You sleep in the chair while she took your bed. She was hurt. She needed it more. Most men take what they need first, then give what remains. Then most men are fools, can't eat pride, can't drink selfishness. All it does is make you alone. Standing Bear rose from his seat, moving with the fluid grace of a man half his age. He walked around Jeb slowly, examining him like a horse he might purchase. You speak of loneliness like you know it well. 5 years I've been out here. You're the most people I've seen at once since I arrived. Yet you chose this loneliness. Better than the alternative. Better than watching people hurt each other for coins and cattle. Better than being betrayed again. And now that helping my daughter has brought 200 warriors to your door, do you regret your kindness? Jeb considered the question, aware that his answer might determine his fate. No, sir, I don't. If I die tonight for helping her, at least I die doing something right. That's more than most get. Silent Moon moved suddenly, going to her father and signing emphatically. Her hands moved too fast for Jeb to follow individual gestures, but he caught the emotion pleading, insistence, even anger. Standing Bear responded in Comanche, his tone firm but gentle. She shook her head, signed again, this time ending by pointing at Jeb, then at herself, then making a bridge motion between them. What's she saying? Jeb asked Spotted Eagle. The young warrior looked uncomfortable. She says the spirits brought her to you for a reason. Says you could teach our people about whites who are different. Says she could teach your people that we are not savages. She wants... What? Standing Bear answered directly. She wants to stay, to learn your medicine, your ways of healing. She believes you would teach her without trying to convert her or change her. She believes... He paused, struggling with something. She believes you see her as a person, not as an Indian woman. This is rare. The gathered warriors erupted in discussion. Some seemed outraged at the suggestion, others thoughtful. The debate raged in Comanche, voices rising and falling like waves against shore. Silent Moon stood calmly in the center of it all, her chin raised, defiant and determined. Finally, Standing Bear raised his hand for silence. The night grows old, he said in English. We will continue this in the morning, but know this, white man Jeb Hartley. My daughter lives because of you. Whatever comes next, that debt stands. As the warriors dispersed to their sleeping places around the homestead, Silent Moon caught Jeb's eye. She placed her hand over her heart, then extended it toward him once more. Then she signed something slow and clear, simple enough that even he could understand "thank you." And then, surprisingly, "friend." Jeb nodded, understanding that somehow, in the space between rescue and reckoning, something had shifted. He wasn't just a white man anymore, and she wasn't just an Indian woman. They were two people who had found unexpected grace in each other's humanity, and that simple truth might be enough to change everything. The morning came slowly, painting the prairie in shades of rose and gold. Jeb hadn't slept, sitting in his doorway watching the warriors camp, where sentries changed through the night with military precision. Now, as dawn broke fully, the camp stirred to life with purposeful movement. Cooking fires sent smoke spiraling into the brightening sky, and the smell of burning sage mixed with coffee from Jeb's own pot. Silent Moon had insisted on making it for everyone who wanted some, using his meager supply. Standing Bear called for counsel as the sun climbed higher. The warriors gathered in a wide circle, with Jeb placed prominently where all could see him. Silent Moon sat beside her father, her presence both protective and challenging. Spotted Eagle stood ready to translate, though his expression suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. An older warrior rose first, his voice carrying the weight of many battles. Spotted Eagle translated, "Black Crow says the white man might be different, but his people are not. They will come eventually, as they always do. If we leave him here alive, he could bring soldiers, tell them of our camp, our numbers." Several warriors murmured agreement. Another stood, younger, with fresh scars across his chest. "Running Wolf lost his brother to white soldiers 3 moons past. He says kindness to one woman does not erase the blood between our peoples. He asks what proof we have that this man won't betray us when we leave." Jeb felt the circle's tension tightening like a noose. Standing Bear listened without expression, letting each warrior speak their mind. Silent Moon's hands clenched and unclenched in her lap, but she remained still, respecting the council's process. Red Hawk, the older warrior who had spoken in Jeb's favor the night before, rose next. His words were measured, careful. "We test our young warriors before they join the hunt. We test our horses before we ride them to battle. Why not test this white man? Let him prove his intentions through action, not words." "What test would satisfy you?" Standing Bear asked in English, including Jeb in the question. Red Hawk considered, then spoke at length. Spotted Eagle translated, "He suggests the test of trust. We leave Silent Moon here to learn the white man's medicine, as she wishes. If Jeb Hartley betrays her, uses her, or brings soldiers, then we know his true heart. If he protects her, teaches her, treats her with respect, then perhaps—" He paused. "Perhaps we have found something rare." The suggestion caused an immediate uproar. Warriors jumped to their feet, voices raised in anger and disbelief. Leave the chief's daughter with a white stranger. It was unthinkable. Standing Bear raised his hand repeatedly, but the chaos continued until Silent Moon stood. She didn't shout or gesture dramatically. She simply stood, tall and dignified, and waited. One by one, the warriors fell silent, ashamed perhaps at their outburst in front of her. When she had their attention, she began to sign, slow and deliberate, making sure everyone could follow. "She says," Spotted Eagle translated, his voice subdued, "that you speak of her like property to be protected or traded. She reminds you that she escaped the Kiowa alone, survived the prairie alone, chose to trust this man alone. She is not a child needing your protection, but a woman making her choice." She turned to face each section of the circle as she continued signing. "She says this man saw her only as a person in need, not as Comanche, not as woman to be taken, not as enemy to be feared, just as a person. When was the last time any of you looked at a white person that way? When was the last time you tried?" The warriors shifted uncomfortably. Silent Moon continued, her signs becoming more passionate. "She says the war between our peoples grows larger each season. Soon, There will be no place for either side to exist in peace. But what if there could be understanding? What if some whites could learn we are not savages, and some of our people could learn that not all whites are evil? What if this is the beginning the spirits offer? Standing Bear watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and sorrow. When she finished, he spoke in Comanche for a long time. The warriors listened intently, some nodding, others frowning. Finally, he turned to Jeb. I will ask you questions. White man, answer truthfully, for we will know if you lie. Jeb nodded. Ask, why do you live alone? I told you, my brother's betrayal broke something in me. I couldn't stand to be around people's greed and lies anymore. The prairie doesn't lie. It's hard, but it's honest. Yet you helped my daughter. She didn't want anything from me except to live. That's the most honest thing there is. If she stays to learn your medicine, your ways, what would you ask in return? Nothing. Standing Bear's eyes narrowed. All men want something. Jeb thought carefully. I suppose I'd want to learn too. Her language, the signs she makes. Maybe understand how she sees the world without sound. Could be useful, knowing how to help without words getting in the way. Silent Moon signed something quickly to her father. He almost smiled. She says you already understand more than you know. Chief Standing Bear, Jeb said, standing slowly, making sure his movements weren't threatening. I can't promise to change the world. Can't promise to stop the war between our peoples or heal wounds that run generations deep. But I can promise this. Your daughter will be safe with me. She'll be respected. She'll be free to leave whenever she chooses. And if trouble comes, I'll stand between her and it, same as I would for my own kin. Even if that trouble is your own people. Especially then, a man who won't stand up to his own when they're wrong isn't much of a man. Standing Bear studied him for a long moment. Around them, the warriors waited, tension thick as morning mist. Even the horses seemed to sense the moment's weight, standing still and quiet. There is another way, a new voice said in accented English. An elderly warrior, bent with age but with eyes sharp as obsidian, stepped forward. I am White Eagle, the band's medicine man. The spirits spoke to me in the night. They showed me this white man teaching many, not just Silent Moon. They showed me Silent Moon teaching many, not just him. They showed me. He paused, seeming to struggle with the vision. They showed me children, both white and Comanche, learning together. The dream was strange but clear. The warriors exchanged glances. A medicine man's visions were not dismissed lightly. Standing Bear looked at the elderly man with deep respect. What do the spirits counsel, grandfather? White Eagle walked to Jeb, circled him once, then placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. The spirits say this man's heart is empty of hate. They say he could be a bridge, if we let him. But bridges can be burned from either side. The test is not just of him, but of us. Can we trust when trust has been betrayed so many times? Can we hope when hope has led to sorrow? He removed his hand and walked to Silent Moon, signing something to her that made her eyes widen. She signed back rapidly, and the old man nodded. She asks if I truly saw the vision of children learning together. I tell her yes. She says this is what she has dreamed since she was small, a place where understanding grows like prairie grass after rain. Standing Bear stood, his decision clearly wrestling within him, the safety of his daughter against the possibility of peace, the known patterns of violence against the unknown path of trust. Around him, his warriors waited, would follow whatever he decided, but the weight of choice was his alone. Jeb Hartley, he said finally, you offer to teach my daughter your medicine. I offer you something in return, our protection. If she stays, you are under the protection of our band. Any who harm you, harm us. But, his voice hardened, if you betray this trust, if you harm her or use her ill, There is no place on this earth where you can hide from our vengeance. I understand. Do you understand that you're taking not just my daughter, but the hope of our people, that what happens here could echo for generations? Jeb met his gaze steadily. Chief, I've lived 5 years with nothing but regret for company. You're offering me a chance to do something that matters. I won't waste it. Standing Bear nodded slowly, then made his announcement in Comanche. The reaction was mixed. Some warriors nodded approval, others shook their heads in disbelief, but all would abide by their chief's decision. As the council dispersed, Silent Moon approached Jeb and signed something simple, which Spotted Eagle translated with obvious reluctance. She says you are brave or foolish, maybe both, but she is glad. She says together you will learn if peace is possible, one person at a time. The weight of what had just been decided settled over the prairie like morning dew, fragile, precious, and dependent on the coming heat of the day not to evaporate into nothing. The fires burned low as night settled over the prairie, casting long shadows across the assembled warriors. They had made camp in a wide circle around Jeb's homestead, their presence both protective and watchful. The day's decision hung in the air like smoke, some warriors accepting, others clearly troubled by their chief's choice. Silent Moon sat between her father and Jeb near the central fire, serving as a bridge between two worlds that had never meant to meet peacefully. Standing Bear stared into the flames for a long moment before speaking. You asked why you live alone, Jeb Hartley. Now I ask what drove you to such solitude. A man does not choose the empty prairie without carrying heavy ghosts. Jeb poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks rise into the darkness. My brother Samuel and I built a farm together in Missouri, worked it 10 years, side by side. I went to work the railroad one winter. We needed the money for seed and supplies. When I came back, he'd sold everything to land speculators. Took my wife, too. Convinced her I was never coming back, that she deserved better than a man who worked with his hands. Spotted Eagle translated for those who didn't speak English. Several warriors made sounds of understanding. Betrayal by family was a wound they recognized. She went willing, Standing Bear asked. Must have. Samuel showed me the divorce papers she'd signed. Said I was too trusting, too soft for the changing world. Said the frontier needed men who could take what they wanted, not men who shared what they had. Jeb's voice carried no anger, only a deep weariness. Maybe they were right. Maybe I don't fit in their world. So I found a place where their world hadn't reached yet. Silent Moon signed something to her father, her movements gentle. Standing Bear nodded and spoke at length in Comanche. The warriors listened intently, their faces shifting from skepticism to something approaching understanding. I tell them, Standing Bear said, switching back to English, that you know the pain of losing everything to those you trusted. This is something we understand well. The white government makes treaties, then breaks them when gold is found or land is wanted. They promise protection, then send soldiers. Trust becomes a luxury we cannot afford. Yet you're trusting me with your daughter. Perhaps trust must begin somewhere, or we all die separate and afraid. Standing Bear's voice carried the weight of difficult wisdom. My grandfather told me of the first time our people saw white men. We helped them, traded with them, showed them water in the desert. For a time, there was peace. Then more came, and more, like locusts that never stop eating. Red Hawk spoke up, his aged voice carrying across the circle. Spotted Eagle translated. He says his father remembered those early days too. Says the first whites were different, hungry for knowledge, not land, eager to learn, not just take. Perhaps, Red Hawk gestured toward Jeb, this one is like those first ones. A younger warrior, his face painted with fresh grief marks, stood abruptly. His words came fast and angry. Spotted Eagle hesitated before translating. Swift River says his wife was killed by white soldiers 6 moons past. She was gathering berries, nothing more. They shot her for sport. He asks how we can speak of trust when such things happen. The circle fell silent. Silent Moon rose and walked to Swift River. She signed to him slowly, respectfully. His face contorted with pain, but he watched her hands. When she finished, she placed her hand over his heart, then her own, then pointed to Jeb. She tells him, Spotted Eagle said softly, that she understands his pain, that nothing can bring back his wife. But she asks if killing all whites would bring her back. Would that not have happened already? How many have we killed in revenge? Has any of it brought back even one lost loved one? Swift River's shoulders sagged. He spoke quietly, the anger draining from his voice. He says no. The dead stay dead, no matter how much blood we spill. Standing Bear stood, commanding attention. This is why I consider this path. We are strong warriors, but each season we grow fewer. The buffalo disappear. The soldiers multiply. If we fight until the last warrior falls, what happens to our children, our ways, our stories? He looked at Jeb. Perhaps some whites can learn to see us as we are. Perhaps some can speak for us to their people. I'm just one man, Jeb said. I got no influence, no power. The avalanche begins with one stone. White Eagle, the medicine man, observed. The prairie fire begins with one spark. Who can say what one man's actions might begin? Silent Moon returned to the fire and began signing elaborately. Her father watched, occasionally asking for clarification. When she finished, he looked troubled but thoughtful. My daughter proposes something bold, he said. She says if she stays and learns the white man's medicine, she could help both peoples. When whites are injured or sick, she could heal them, showing them that Indians are not savages. When our people are hurt, she could use both medicines, ours and theirs, to heal. She would be not just learning, but teaching through action. That's dangerous thinking, Spotted Eagle said, forgetting his role as translator. Whites don't accept Indian healers. They think our medicine is superstition. Some do, Jeb said. But out here, when you're dying, you don't much care who helps you or how. I've seen plenty of frontier folks use Indian remedies when white doctors' medicine failed. Your daughter's right actions speak louder than words or treaties. Standing Bear walked to his daughter, placed his hands on her shoulders. They communicated in signs for a long moment, a private conversation in the midst of many. When they finished, both had tears in their eyes. A father's heart and a chief's mind war within me. Standing Bear said, The father wants to take his daughter far from all whites, keep her safe. The chief sees a chance, slim as grass blade, for something better than endless war. How does a man choose between safety and hope? He doesn't, Jeb said quietly. He lets the person facing the choice decide for themselves. Your daughter's no child. She survived capture, escape, near death. She's earned the right to choose her path. Silent Moon signed something that made several warriors chuckle despite the tension. Spotted Eagle smiled slightly as he translated. She says the white man understands women better than most warriors do. The laughter broke something in the circle's tension. Warriors began talking more freely, some still opposed but less angry. The conversation flowed between English and Comanche, with Silent Moon's signs bridging both when words failed. As the moon rose full and bright, Standing Bear made a declaration. Tomorrow, we leave. Silent Moon stays if she chooses. Jeb Hartley, you are now under our protection. This mark, he drew a symbol in the dirt, a circle with 4 lines extending outward. If you draw this, any of our people will know you are friend, not enemy. But remember, if I betray the trust, there's nowhere to hide. I understand. Chief, I got nothing but this land and my word. I aim to keep both. Silent Moon signed something to Spotted Eagle. He nodded and spoke to Jeb. She asks if you will start teaching her your letters tomorrow. She wants to learn to read the white man's medicine books, and I'd like to learn those hand signs of hers, if she's willing to teach me." Standing Bear stood, signaling the council's end. "Then it is decided. We leave at dawn. May the spirits watch over this strange alliance." He looked at Jeb one last time. "You take a great risk, white man. My daughter is precious to our people. All people are precious to someone. Chief." That's what we keep forgetting. As the warriors dispersed to their sleeping places, Silent Moon remained by the fire. She drew in the dirt 2 stick figures on opposite sides of a river, then slowly added a bridge between them, one small line at a time. When she looked up at Jeb, he nodded understanding. They would build that bridge, one day at a time, one lesson at a time, one act of trust at a time. The prairie wind carried the sound of warrior songs into the night, ancient melodies that spoke of courage and loss, war and hope. Tomorrow would bring change for everyone around this fire. But tonight, for just this moment, there was peace between peoples who had forgotten such a thing was possible. Dawn broke across the prairie with a magnificence that made even hardened warriors pause. The sky transformed from black to deep purple, then blazed into gold and crimson as the sun crowned the horizon. Standing Bear stood before the assembled warriors, his war bonnet catching the first rays of light. The time for decision had come, and with it, the weight of consequences that would ripple through generations. The chief raised his lance high, commanding absolute attention. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of countless ancestors. Spotted Eagle translated for Jeb, though the power of Standing Bear's words needed no translation. "Warriors of our band, hear me now. We stand at a crossing place, not just of trails but of times. The old ways and the new ways meet here, at this small homestead, in these 2 people." He gestured to Jeb and Silent Moon, who stood side by side near the cabin. "Some of you say I am foolish to trust any white man. Some say I risk too much leaving my daughter here. Perhaps you are right." Several younger warriors shifted restlessly, their painted faces revealing lingering doubt. Swift River, who had spoken of his murdered wife the night before, stepped forward. "My chief, I have thought through the night. My heart still bleeds for my woman, but—" He paused, struggling with the words. "But she always said hatred was a poison that kills the one who drinks it. If Silent Moon believes this path leads somewhere besides more graves, I will not stand against it." His words caused murmurs through the assembly. Other warriors began to speak, some supporting, others questioning. Standing Bear let them voice their thoughts, patient as the prairie itself. When the last man had spoken, he addressed them again. "I have decided, but this decision requires more than my word alone. It requires witness and ceremony." He turned to White Eagle, the medicine man. "Grandfather, will you speak the old words?" White Eagle nodded, moving forward with surprising grace for his age. From his medicine bag, he withdrew sacred items, an eagle feather, a small pouch of earth, sweet grass for burning. He began to chant in the ancient tongue, words that predated memory, calling on the spirits to witness what would transpire. As the sweet grass smoke rose, White Eagle walked around Jeb and Silent Moon, encircling them with the sacred smoke. Then he spoke in English, surprising everyone. "The spirits have shown me this moment in dreams, 2 peoples, like 2 rivers, flowing side by side but never meeting. Today, we dig the first channel between them. It may fail, the channel may fill with blood instead of water, but if we do not try, both rivers will dry up in the desert that is coming." He placed the eagle feather in Silent Moon's hand, then took Jeb's hand and placed it over hers, the feather between them. This feather flew between earth and sky, belonging to neither, touching both. Let it remind you of what you attempt to live between worlds and help them speak. Standing Bear stepped forward next. "Jeb Hartley, before all my warriors, I name you friend of the band. This is not given lightly. Only 3 white men have received this honor in my lifetime, and 2 betrayed it. He drew his knife, and several warriors tensed, but he merely cut a strip of leather from his own war shirt. This bears my mark. Any who see it will know you are under our protection. Jeb accepted the leather strip with both hands, understanding the weight of what was being given. Chief Standing Bear, I got nothing of equal value to give in return, except my word. Your word is all we have. Make it enough. Silent Moon began signing rapidly to her father. He watched, his stern expression softening slightly. When she finished, he spoke again. My daughter reminds me that trust is not built with grand gestures but with small daily choices. She asks that we do not make this farewell heavy with sorrow, but light with hope. Red Hawk, the elderly warrior who had supported Jeb from the beginning, approached carrying something wrapped in deer hide. I have something, he said in his broken English. He unwrapped the bundle, revealing a worn leather book filled with pictures, drawings of plants, animals, healing symbols. My woman made this. She learned the white man's medicine from captive time, mixed with our ways. Silent Moon should have it. Silent Moon accepted the book with reverence, signing her thanks. Red Hawk then turned to Jeb. You teach her your medicine, but learn ours too. Not all healing comes from white man's books. I'd be honored to learn, grandfather. The sun climbed higher, and Standing Bear knew the time for leaving had come. But one more ceremony remained. He called Silent Moon to him and spoke in Comanche, then in English for Jeb to understand. Daughter, you have chosen a path no woman of our band has walked. You will face anger from both peoples, trust from neither, understanding from few. Are you certain? Silent Moon's hands moved with absolute certainty. Spotted Eagle translated. She says certainty is for fools and mountains. She is neither, but she is willing, and that must be enough. Standing Bear embraced his daughter, a long moment that held years of memory and fear for the future. When they parted, he turned to his warriors. Mount up. We ride. But the warriors didn't move immediately. Instead, one by one, they began to approach Jeb. Not all, some remained distant, disapproving, but many. Each warrior who approached raised his lance or bow or tomahawk, not in threat but in salute. Swift River was among them, tears streaming down his painted cheeks. We witness, they said in Comanche, and Spotted Eagle translated. We witness this attempt at peace. The gesture overwhelmed Jeb. 200 warriors saluting a lone white drifter, it was something beyond his imagination. He stood straighter, understanding that he was accepting not just Silent Moon's presence, but the hope of an entire people. As the warriors began mounting their horses, Standing Bear approached Jeb one final time. She will want to return to visit. When she does, draw the symbol I showed you in the earth where our scouts can see. We will know she is ready to come home for a time. And if trouble comes, if other whites threaten her, then you will learn if our protection has meaning. But I think, Jeb Hartley, you will protect her yourself before it comes to that. With my life, Chief. Standing Bear studied him one last moment. I believe you would. That is why she stays. He turned to Silent Moon, signed something that made her smile through her tears, then mounted his black stallion. The war band formed up with military precision, 200 warriors creating an impressive line across the prairie. Standing Bear raised his lance high, and, as one, every warrior raised their weapons not in threat but in farewell, in witness, in hope for something none of them could fully imagine but were willing to let begin. Then they rode, thunder across the grassland, leaving dust and dreams in their wake. Jeb and Silent Moon stood watching until the last warrior disappeared over the horizon, until the dust settled and the prairie returned to its endless whisper. Silent Moon touched Jeb's arm gently, then pointed to the cabin. She made the sign for learn and then begin. Despite everything that had just transpired, despite the weight of what they'd undertaken, she was ready to start immediately. All right then, Jeb said. managing a smile. I reckon we start with the alphabet, though I got to warn you, my handwriting's terrible. She signed something he didn't understand, but her expression was amused. Spotted Eagle had left behind a paper with basic signs drawn out his parting gift, though he'd never admit to kindness. Using it, Jeb worked out that she'd said something about his cooking being terrible too, but she'd survived it. As they walked toward the cabin, the prairie seemed different somehow, less empty, less hostile. The same grass waved in the same wind, but now it seemed to whisper possibilities instead of loneliness. They had work to do, languages to learn, medicines to share, and somehow, against all odds in history, trust to build. Behind them, the smoke from the ceremonial fire still rose, a thin line connecting earth to sky, marking the place where 200 warriors had chosen hope over hate, where a lonely drifter had chosen purpose over safety, where a deaf Comanche woman had chosen to become a bridge between worlds that had forgotten they were both human. The sun climbed toward noon, and the work of peace harder than any war began with the simple act of two people walking through a doorway together, ready to learn. 3 months had passed since the warriors rode away, 3 months of daily miracles that neither Jeb nor Silent Moon could have imagined. The cabin had transformed from a lonely shelter into something resembling a schoolhouse, with letters chalked on smooth boards, medicinal herbs hanging from the rafters, and books, real books that Jeb had traded for with passing wagons. Plus the precious medical text a traveling doctor had left in exchange for a week's shelter and food. Silent Moon sat at the rough table, carefully copying words from the medical book into her own journal, her handwriting now steadier than Jeb's had ever been. She'd mastered the alphabet in 2 weeks, basic words in 4, and now read with a hunger that reminded Jeb of himself as a boy, before the world had turned hard. In exchange, she'd taught him over 100 signs, and they'd developed their own language, part English, part sign, part simply understanding. The morning sun streamed through windows now adorned with curtains she'd made from traded cloth, decorated with beadwork that caught the light. Jeb was grinding willow bark the way she'd shown him good for pain and fever. The same medicine white doctors sold as aspirin powder but charged 10 times as much for. Silent Moon suddenly stood, moving to the window with the alertness of someone who'd learned to sense danger through vibrations and shadows. She signed rapidly. "Someone comes. Hurt." Jeb joined her at the window. A rider approached, slumped in his saddle, his horse walking with the slow gait of exhaustion. Even from a distance, they could see the dark stain of blood on the man's shirt. "White man?" Jeb observed, then saw Silent Moon's hesitation. "We help everyone." That was the promise. She nodded, but her hand signed. "Careful. Scared men are dangerous." They met the rider at the fence. He was young, maybe 25, with a bullet wound in his shoulder. His eyes went wide with fear when he saw Silent Moon, and he reached weakly for the gun at his hip. "Don't," Jeb said firmly. "She's here to help. You want that shoulder looked at, or you want to bleed out being foolish." The young man's hand fell away from his weapon. She's Indian. She's a healer, better than any doctor you'll find within 100 miles. Now, can we help you or not? Pain won over prejudice." The man nodded weakly. Together, Jeb and Silent Moon got him inside, laid him on the cot. Silent Moon's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away the bloody shirt, examining the wound. She signed to Jeb. "Bullet still inside. Must remove." "You ever done this before?" She nodded, holding up 3 fingers, then signing, "Taught by Army doctor." Prisoner exchange. He was kind. While Jeb held the man steady, Silent Moon worked. She'd sterilized her tools in boiling water, something she'd learned from the medical book that even many white doctors didn't do. Her fingers were gentle but sure as she extracted the bullet, packed the wound with herbs that would prevent infection, and bandaged it with clean cloth. The young man drifted in and out of consciousness, but when he woke fully, he stared at Silent Moon with amazement. She saved me." "That's what she does," Jeb said simply. But I've been told, I mean, everyone says Indians are savages, Jeb finished. Son, the only savage thing here was whoever put that bullet in you. The man was silent for a moment, then said, Road agents. Tried to rob me. I'm carrying payroll money to Fort Laramie. His eyes widened in sudden fear. The money is still in your saddlebags, Jeb assured him. We didn't touch it except to bring it inside for safety. The young man looked between them, confusion clear on his face. You could have taken it. I was unconscious. Why didn't you? Silent Moon signed something to Jeb, who translated, She says stealing from the helpless is what makes someone savage, not the color of their skin or the language they speak. Over the next 3 days, as the man Thomas Brennan recovered, he watched Silent Moon and Jeb work together. Other visitors came, a Mexican family whose child had fever, an old white prospector with a broken arm, even a young Cheyenne warrior who appeared at dawn with a deep gash in his leg, wary but desperate. Silent Moon treated them all with equal care. The Cheyenne warrior was most surprised, signing to her in the plain sign language that tribes shared. They conversed rapidly, and Jeb caught enough to understand the warrior was asking why she helped whites. Her response was simple. Healing has no enemies. Thomas watched all this with growing wonder. On his third night, as Silent Moon changed his bandages, he asked Jeb, How did this happen? This place, you two. Jeb told him the story, finding Silent Moon, the 200 warriors, Standing Bear's decision. Thomas listened in amazement. You're telling me the Comanche chief left his daughter here with you to learn, to teach, too? She's taught me more about medicine in 3 months than I learned in 30 years. And not just medicine. Jeb watched Silent Moon work, her movements graceful and sure. She's taught me that understanding doesn't always need words. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. My father was killed by Comanches 10 years ago. I've hated them ever since. But she... He looked at Silent Moon, who was now preparing medicine for the Mexican child. She makes me wonder if I've been hating the wrong things. Silent Moon must have sensed the weight of his gaze because she looked up, offering him a gentle smile. She signed something to Jeb. She says hate is heavy to carry. It's all right to put it down when you're ready. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I think I might be ready. And word spread in the way prairie news always did, carried by travelers, whispered at trading posts, discussed around campfires, the strange homestead where a white drifter and a Comanche woman healed anyone who came, asked for no payment except what people could spare, and somehow made peace possible in a land torn by war. Some came suspicious, weapons ready, only to leave humbled by kindness. Others came desperate, having nowhere else to turn, and left whole in more ways than just physical. The small cabin became neutral ground, a place where enemies could exist in the same space without violence, united by the common need for healing. One evening, as autumn painted the prairie gold, Standing Bear returned. He came alone this time, appearing at sunset like a ghost from the grass. Silent Moon ran to him, and they embraced with the joy of father and daughter too long apart. He stayed for 3 days, observing the changes, the expanded garden of medicinal plants, the shelter they'd built for traveling patients, the books and supplies traded for services rendered, but most of all, he observed his daughter confident, purposeful, bridging worlds with grace. She has become more than I imagined, he told Jeb on the last evening, as they sat watching Silent Moon teach a young white girl and a Pawnee boy how to sign basic words. The children giggled as they learned, natural enemies becoming playmates through the magic of shared language. She was already more than anyone imagined. She just needed space to show it. Standing Bear nodded slowly. You have kept your word, Jeb Hartley, more than kept it. You have helped her become a bridge. He paused, watching his daughter. The world changes. The buffalo disappear. The soldiers multiply. Perhaps warriors like me cannot stop this change, but perhaps healers like her can shape what comes after. Chief, she shapes what comes now. Every person she helps sees Indians differently. Every Indian who comes here sees that not all whites are the same. It's slow, but it's real. The avalanche begins with one stone. Standing Bear quoted White Eagle's words. Perhaps this stone has already started rolling. When Standing Bear left, he took with him stories to tell his band of white children learning Comanche signs, of Mexican families sitting peacefully beside white settlers, of his daughter becoming something new, neither fully Comanche nor fully white, but something more essential, fully human, fully healer, fully bridge. As winter approached, Jeb and Silent Moon stood outside their cabin, watching the sun set over the prairie. The landscape that had once seemed empty to Jeb now teemed with purpose. Silent Moon signed to him, home. He understood. This wasn't just a place anymore. It was a beginning, a seed of something that might, with enough care and courage, grow into understanding. Two people who'd started as strangers had become partners in the most important work of all, proving that peace was possible. One act of healing at a time. The prairie wind carried the smoke from their chimney across the grassland, and with it, perhaps, the hope that 200 warriors had dared to imagine, that a lonely drifter had chosen to nurture, and that a deaf woman's eloquent hands continued to build. One saved life. One changed heart. One bridged soul at a time. You know, friend. I've been telling stories on this prairie for more years than I care to count, but this one always stays with me. Maybe because it reminds me of something we forget when the world gets hard, that gratitude isn't just saying thanks. It's seeing the humanity in someone when everything tells you not to. Jeb could have left that woman to die. Would have been safer, easier. But gratitude for life itself, for the chance to do good, made him reach out. And Silent Moon, she could have let those warriors kill him, could have nodded and walked away. Instead, she stood between violence and mercy, grateful for kindness when she'd expected cruelty. That's what built their strange family, not blood, not words they could speak to each other at first, but gratitude that became understanding, understanding that became trust, trust that became love. Not the romantic kind necessarily, but the deeper kind. The kind that says, "You're family now, because you chose to see me as human when you didn't have to." Every person who came to that cabin learned the same lesson. Family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to heal with, who you choose to hope with. Sometimes the strongest bridges are built from simple gratitude.